I hereby call to order this meeting of the King George County Service Authority Board of Directors. We'll begin with the invocation, actually by Ms. Bender this evening. If you will all please stand as you are able.
Please, Lord, grant us the wisdom and the guidance to work together for the common good of King George. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Weekly, sir, do we have any amendments to the agenda?
No amendments, Madam Chair.
Very good, then we'll move on to public comment. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person in order to afford everyone an opportunity to speak. If comments relate to a specific public hearing item, we ask that you offer those comments at the time of the public hearing. Is there anyone here in the audience who wishes to provide public comment this evening? Mr. Dines, do we have anyone online, sir?
Not for this meeting. No.
Not for this meeting. Very good. All right, we'll move on to reports of members of the board. Mr. Parker.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I do have one thing that occurred. I do want to thank the technician that came out late at night to check an alarm that was going off on Spinnaker Avenue over in Hop Yard. That incident caused the realization that we really need to put signs on our pump stations that say, please call if there's an alarm going off. There was a Facebook post going around on the Hop Yard page, and apparently the alarm had been going off all day, and most of the people there do not know that's Service Authority property, so nobody bothered to call until I noticed it on the Facebook page. So just a suggestion is we probably should have signs that say, if an alarm's going off, please call, so that they know. I know what a pump station looks like, but evidently a lot of people do not. Thank you.
That's a great suggestion, Mr. Parker. Mr. Weekly, could you look into that, please, for us?
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Morris.
No report, ma'am.
Ms. Bender?
No report.
Ms. Cleveland? No report. And I have no report as well. So we will move on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. All right, report from the county attorney, Mr. Britton.
No report, Madam Chair.
Thank you, sir. Presentations and reports. Fairview Beach study by Hampton Road Sanitation District. Mr. Gonzalez, can you hear us, sir?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
All right, we're pulling up your presentation. Yep, there it is.
Great. Hello, everyone. I'm Raul Gonzalez. I'm an environmental scientist at Hampton Road Sanitation District in the Water Quality Division, and I'll be summarizing really quickly our Fairview Beach source tracking results. So some of the work we've done over the last 2 beach seasons at the beach. Next slide, please. Do you mind clicking it one more time? I didn't realize there was animation on this. Thank you. But before I begin, I do want to give a brief background on bacterial water quality. Fecal pollution is a national problem. Bacteria is one of the major causes of water bodies being listed on the impaired waters list. Next slide, please. And do you mind clicking? Thank you. Fecal pollution, specifically bacterial fecal pollution, is monitored by general fecal indicators. These are examples are E. coli, enterococci for recreational waters, and fecal coliforms for shellfish harvesting waters. These general fecal indicators are in the guts of most animals, and they're actually shed by these animals. They measure total fecal pollution, and when the presence of these general fecal indicators at a certain level, when the presence of these fecal indicators are at a certain level, they can be a warning signal of increased public health risk. However, these general fecal indicators, like E. coli, don't discriminate between sources. So they don't tell you what the actual source of this bacteria is. Next slide, please. But the source of this bacterial fecal pollution is really important because different sources have different public health risks. So for example, if you had a pristine water body, there would be bacteria in the water, but you would have a really low risk of illness from coming in contact with this water. And let's say, hypothetically, all of a sudden you start adding animals. So agriculture, domestic pets, wildlife, all of a sudden you would add fecal indicator bacteria and fecal bacteria to the water, but you would still have a relatively low risk of illness from coming in contact with this water. Now, if all of a sudden you added a wastewater source, a human wastewater source, to this watershed, all of a sudden, and that wastewater was getting into the water, all of a sudden you would have a higher risk of illness, and that's because of the potential presence of human pathogens. Next slide, please. And that's why very recently EPA actually came out with recommendations on how to tell whether there is human fecal contamination in waters, and they released these methods for this marker called HF183. And so for the rest of the presentation, HF183 is a DNA-based marker that tells you whether there is evidence of human fecal contamination in water. Next slide, please. And they actually released a second one at the exact same time. It's called HUMM2, but we didn't actually measure this at in the studies I'm going to describe. So I'm not going to talk about it any longer, but just be aware that they released another marker. Next slide, please. Thank you. And so for the rest of this presentation, I'm just going to describe our results over the course of 2 seasons. In 2019, a few of us, so stakeholders up there at Fairview Beach and some of the scientists here at Hampton Roads Sanitation got together to come up with a pilot. So we wanted to determine whether there was any evidence of human fecal contamination or wastewater at Fairview Beach. But we decided not to just monitor the beach, but we decided to actually go ahead and target the stormwater collection system, so that we could have a higher chance of finding human fecal contamination if present. And I'll give you the perfect reason why. If wastewater were to touch the ground in the watershed upstream of Fairview Beach, the only way it would get to the water is through the path of least resistance, which is always kind of this stormwater collection system. So we came up with a small pilot. We identified 14 high priority areas, including the beach itself, and we're going to sample it for 4 dry weather events. And what you're seeing here is a map of Fairview Beach. Each circle on there is a sampling location, and these are the results for our first dry weather event in July of 2019. So the results are in a heat map. So green, if the dots are green, that means the test was negative, and if it's some variation of yellow or red, that means it was detected and at a certain concentration. So you can see on the first event, a dry weather event, no detection of this marker. And to put it into perspective, during this exact same time, we also monitored, we also processed a wastewater sample from this area, and the concentration of this HF1A3 marker was approximately 1 billion copies of this marker per liter of wastewater. So we saw nothing, and very promising. So a couple weeks later, next slide, please. We repeated it, and exact same results. Nothing. We could detect wastewater if it was diluted up to 1 million-fold, and still couldn't detect anything from dry weather. So we got together and decided, okay, let's move on from dry weather. Let's use these last two events and just sample wet weather, because there are some contamination issues that only present itself during certain hydrologic conditions or a certain amount of rainfall. So next slide, please. All right, now all of a sudden, a few weeks later, there was a rain event. We sampled again, and we have one sample that came up significantly detected, and it's that orange dot that you see at the bottom of the map. And all the rest of the dots were negative or had some type of trace residual, but it wasn't really quantifiable. So all negative except for that one orange dot. Now, sometimes we do get a false positive, so we decided to sample another wet weather event. So next slide, please. I'll mention that one detection isn't a chronic issue, just because there are false positives, and there are, sometimes there's these sporadic events that happen. But in a few months later, we got another opportunity to sample, and all negative again. So, the 2019 sampling campaign put a lot of faith in that there was no obvious human fecal contamination signal at Fairview Beach. Next slide, please. Now, in 2020, we decided to kind of change up our strategy here. So we got a whole lot of non-detections in 2019. So we said, why don't we take the actual samples that exceed at the beach, at Fairview Beach, and process those for our human fecal DNA marker. And I'm just going to be really short. We took 30 samples. We were sent 30 samples from May to July, and all 30 of them were below detection limit. Again, wastewater in this area was about 1 billion copies of this marker, and our detection limit was in the hundreds. It was 276, or actually, let's just say it was 1,000. So that's a 100,000-fold range of detection that wastewater could be diluted and us detect it. And we got 0 detections during beach exceedances during all types of conditions. Next slide, please. So the take-home message here is really simple. Human fecal contamination, as determined by this EPA human DNA marker, human fecal DNA marker, is not the driver behind the recreational water quality exceedances at Fairview Beach. I'm fairly certain we ran these samples actually next to samples at beaches here in Hampton Roads, and I couldn't tell you how different the results were. It was completely different situation. I feel pretty confident that there's no obvious or chronic human wastewater issues in Fairview Beach that are driving these exceedances. So with that, I think I'm probably at my 10 minutes. Next slide, please. I don't know if time allows it, but I could take any questions. Anybody can email me or call me as well. But thank you.
Thank you very much, and I should say Dr. Gonzalez for your presentation. I'll open it up for questions from directors.
No questions, ma'am.
Okay, Mr. Morris.
Yes, sir. Did you actually take any samples from the river bottom, from the runoff? I've contended all along that DC Blue Plains has been notoriously bad from the 60s, and we're right there in the bend of the river where sediment falls out, and I really wonder if it's not something in the riverbed that's getting stirred up.
We did not. We only processed water column samples, but we were sent samples during extreme wind events that did stir up the bottom, and for actually 2020, these were all samples that exceeded the criteria, so that had elevated conditions. And I absolutely know that resuspended bacteria, or in this case E. coli, can cause exceedances, but I'm fairly certain that these bacterial sources don't come from wastewater.
Thank you, sir.
Because we would be able to see it in the marker, with the marker.
Ms. Bender?
I just want to thank Dr. Gonzalez for his work. Appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome.
Ms. Cleveland?
So, yes, thank you. This is a great presentation, a lot of good information. A question that I had was, you had mentioned that this wouldn't be the driving factor of the water quality exceedances. So I'm just trying to understand the reason why this was engaged in this area.
Oh, yes, because, well, there was a study, and the date's slipping me in my mind. I'll just say almost a decade ago, that was done in this area because of water quality exceedances. And they used a different technology at the time, and they determined that there was evidence of human fecal contamination from sewage in the watershed, and detected at the beach. But again, that was a long time ago with a different technology, and a lot of things, happen, maintenance and changing conditions. So we're called back in because of the exceedances that were occurring prior to 2019.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez, for your presentation. This is something that has interested me for quite a while, since probably 2018 when I was on staff here. And I'll note Ms. Marta Perry, the district manager for Tri-County City Soil and Water Conservation District, is here in the audience today. She and I and some past Service Authority Board of Directors and someone from the Department of Health, I believe, walked this area at length one day in an attempt to pursue a grant opportunity to do some of the work that you've done here. So we really appreciate that, because this has been an ongoing issue. One question for you though. So it looks like you've ruled out that human fecal matter is not the cause or the source of the exceedances. Do you have any data about animal?
So we don't, and there's really only three sources of bacteria here in the water column. It either comes from a human source, animal source, or environmental source. And environmental sources are the more complex sources. So like sediment, sand, biofilms, and those bacteria that are in those sources could have been, it could have come from like animal sources. So that could have inoculated the environment that's then resuspending and causing those exceedances. So we've only ruled out one. Those two other sources are, could be one of them is a driver, but no, our priority was just to determine whether wastewater was or wasn't one of them. So no, we have not, but I know that MARTA, that's been thrown around a lot in our discussions. Unfortunately here now during this pandemic at HRSD, we're unable to continue monitoring beaches or just water quality for a little bit, just because the method that we're using or that we used for these analysis is actually the same exact method that's being used for COVID. That's actually the method that we use at HRC to monitor COVID in wastewater. So there's become this big shortage in consumables, and so it's probably for the near future. Unfortunately, we won't be able to do this type of analysis just because of the pandemic.
Okay, thank you very much for all of your work on this and the presentation. Mr. Weekly, did you care to add anything before we move on, sir?
I too want to thank Dr. Gonzalez. I know this has been out there in the public domain for a while, and there were thoughts maybe to source out near Pavilion Drive and other areas, but it's good for us as a service authority is concerned. We know our system is tight and not contributing. So HRSD is a leader in wastewater. I know Mr. Parker's an engineer, probably understands that more so than many, but the technical capabilities they have. So we appreciate them performing that test. It's definitely well beyond our needs. Good data. Thank you, sir, for your time.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you, sir. We'll move on to fiscal year 21-22 Service Authority budget. Mr. Weekly.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Tonight, I'll bring forward to you the final budget presentation. This encompasses all changes or any suggestions that we had through the work session period. Note, I will not be asking for authorization to advertise tonight. There are some rate and edits for Section 30, which is part of our regulation. I will bring that to you at our next meeting to ask for authorization for a public hearing on that information. So I'll start off with the expenditure summaries. We have 2 budget categories now. The board a year or 2 ago said let's move from 4 categories to 2. So the maintenance portion of water and sewer were dissolved into each appropriate category. The expenditures for water, you're just under 2 million, about 1.7 million. And that's for everything from maintenance, operations, staff, chemicals, everything's in that number. Sewer, it's just a little over 3 million. The expenditures, the transfers to capital, so that's made up of debt service, projects, and reserves. Last year was the first year in some time we've actually programmed monies to go into the fund reserves. That's a good thing, and it's something that not only do we track, but Davenport tracks. We have programmed this year about 531,000. In this budget, we have programmed around about 379,000. So you may recall one of our work sessions, we talked about anything beyond things such as merits, any remaining delta between revenues and expenditures, we would program those monies into the reserve. We initially started at 172, so there was just a little bit over 200,000 delta remaining, so it brings you to about 379K. So that brings your total expenditures to just under 7 million. That is an increase from last year for expenditures of roughly 250,000, a little over $250,000. So what makes up some of those increases in the water category? It was an increase over last year of just under 80,000. Some key focal points for this year's funding. We have well house program and control upgrades, so that will be a major improvement. We've concentrated a lot of our budget efforts around wastewater in the past couple years. So there are some programming and SCADA upgrades that need to occur at some of our facilities. On the sewer category, it's an increase of 325,000 over last year. Some key focal points for expenditures are some SCADA upgrades for the Hop Yard Farms wastewater treatment plant as well as Fairview Beach. And those alone are quite expensive. That's around about 400,000. Well, counting in your mixed equipment that we have for Dahlgren. So you're taking care of not only electronic side, that's with SCADA, there's a lot of PLC programming. It's not just push buttons anymore. Even in wastewater, there's programming involved that tells things to turn on and off at certain times, plus some operating parameters that the operators can view in real time. And then mixing equipment, replacing some outdated, primarily failing is what I should say, equipment at Dahlgren. And again, all this should be pointed out we're doing within our operating budget. We're not looking or adding to debt service. So it is an increase of expenditures, but you're covering that through your operating funds. Next, you have a breakout of your revenue summary. So the service authority, as I talked about in our work session, there's certain revenue streams. We either get that through our billable services or you get that through your connection fees. There are small items such as bulk water sales that's listed there for $12,000, but it's not where your main source of revenue comes from. So total revenues expected for this year, or excuse me, for FY22 is at 6.9 million. You can see that the bulk of it in our water fees, where you see water fees, sewer fees, and right below it, water debt fees and sewer debt fees to your left column. Those are all your billable portions along with your capital reserve fee. Anywhere you see connection fee or availability fees, that's what you pay when you go to connect. The budget is based around 50 full service, so that's water and sewer connections for residential only. Our budget is not structured around any commercial development. I will say that there's any on the horizon that we know that's planned, it's worked its way through the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors approval. We'll program that in our revenues. It's just we do not have that on our radar. And I have some connection projections I'll share with you at the end. Occasionally a business will come in and say, hey, my well's failing. Can I connect to your system? So those come in throughout the year, but it's not programmed in your revenue, mainly the 50 water and sewer residential connections. So again, total revenues, I've got a typo there I will correct for the public hearing. My apologies. That's should be $6,990,077. I'm missing a figure there. I apologize. So it is an increase over last year in revenues of roughly $186,000. It seems a little light, but what is not reflected in this year's budget because of the local declared emergency, the board approved language in our regulations that says all fees and such as late fees, which are penalties, are waived during local declared emergencies. So that was an $80,000 line item. That was not accounted for in this revenues because we're not sure when the pandemic will be lifted. So I just wanted to point that out. It would naturally be $80,000 more. This does represent a 4% rate increase that's applied across the board. So that's everything from your billables, your consumption fees, and the debt fees and the capital reserve fees. And that's based on the approved 5-year rate plan that was approved back in FY20. And again, the 5-year intervals broke out in increases of year 1, 10%, years 2, 3, and 4 will be at 4% increases, and that 5th year being at 3%. So we're in a 4% interval at this time. And although that takes effect July 1, you won't see that until your September 2021 bill because we bill bi-monthly. So this is some of the rate structures that you will also see in the edits for our Section 30 regulation. So this just reflects the 4% increase. Again, that's across the board. So whether it's a consumption fee or debt user fee, capital fee, if you hone in on the bottom for minimum bill and average bi-monthly bill, that's the total combined. So an average a minimum customer is someone who uses 3,000 gallons or less in a bi-monthly period. So again, 60 days. And then your average bi-monthly, that's someone who used roughly 10,000 gallons in a bi-monthly period. So that's at $284.37. Again, that's bi-monthly. There are no increases on connection fees, septic disposal, tampering fees. Nothing changes there. Again, it's the rate structure, so your billable services. And this is a breakout. This was just added to give you some more visual of what does your breakout look like for your revenue. So your largest portions, and really starting with your top line on your legend at the bottom, working left to right, you can see your water fees. Again, that's a billable service. That's the bi-monthly charges. You're at 22% of your revenue. The sewer fees, which is that green color, you're at 30%. Your water debt fees, you're at 16%. Sewer debt fees at 15%. And then when you get into your connection fees, you're roughly about 17%. So That leaves you with, I believe less than 10%, which is contributed either transferred from general fund or capital reserve fees. So the bulk of it is through your billable services, followed by your connection fees, and then the transfer from the general fund. So for example, there's a little over 80,000. That's the county's portion they agreed to through an upgrade of a pump station at the industrial park. Moving on to your expenditure summary, there's your breakdown for the expenditures. So on the water operations side, you're expending roughly 25% is contributed to water. As you can see, sewer is much larger. It's almost double. We're at 48%. And then again, the transfer portion is your debt service or reserves. That makes up 27% of the expenditure side of the budget. And then I always like to leave you with the budget summary when it means, what if I'm receiving a bill? What does that increase look like based on that 4%? And I did it in a bi-monthly. Maybe at some point, if we ever go to monthly billing, I'll give you that monthly breakdown. I am going to mention that just real quick. So bi-monthly, the minimum bill, that's up to 3,000 gallons. It's an increase of $6.09 on your bill. If you are the average bi-monthly customer, that's up to 10,000 gallons. Your bill will increase $10.92. So if you looked at it from a monthly perspective, if you're a minimum bill customer, it's a little over $3. If you're an average bi-monthly customer, it's a little over $5. It is an increase, but I'm just trying to put it in impact of what that means. And again, our connection projections, that should change as well. My apologies, that should be FY22. But we have, since the rate plan was approved in FY20, we have stuck with that 50 full service connection. So there's 0 water only and 0 commercial connections because that's not given. That can come through the door anytime for the request. So again, we stuck with our financial model, which represents 50 full service connections. And with that, Madam Chair, I'll take any questions the board may have.
Thank you, Mr. Weekly. Mr. Parker, would you like to start us off, sir?
No questions, ma'am.
Mr. Morris?
No questions, ma'am.
Ms. Bender?
Mr. Weekly, just for clarification, so the rate increase and the average bi-monthly rate increase, that also includes to the debt, correct? That's everything?
Yes, ma'am. So the percentages when the plan was approved, that gets applied across all the fees. So whether it's the user fees, which is what you use in water and sewer, or the fixed debt fees, which is water debt, sewer debt, and the capital reserve fee.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Cleveland?
Yes, thank you. So I did have a question about how the revenue and expenses are shown throughout the cycle as far as where you are in relation to budget. So when we get the warrants that are paid every board meeting, to me, it seems like it would be better if we had it in comparison to what the budget is. And so I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. And do you have some way that you can sort of show us where in relation to budget we are with some of these different accounts?
Yes, ma'am, and I apologize for delay. I can recall probably December, the board had asked for some financials. We're trying to do some cleanup on some of our revenues through our muni billing system. We believe we've got, and I don't want to say error like money is missing, is just the account that it was applied to. So all the financial information is accurate from when it passes through the Treasury, through finance, and back through us. So as soon as that gets worked out, I will send that updated information to you. That should come on a monthly basis. So as soon as that cleaned up, when I have it, I will just scan it and email it to the board. And if you want that at a board meeting, surely I could put that up on the screen. But yes, ma'am, there normally would be monthly reports.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great, thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
So can I make a suggestion? Perhaps you could email it to the directors on a monthly basis, and in the interest of transparency to our customers, you could present it at a meeting on a quarterly basis. Would that work for you, Ms. Cleveland?
Yes, I think that's great. Thanks.
Okay, very good. All right, I did not have any questions. I just want to thank you, Mr. Weekly. I know you and I spoke yesterday, and I asked if you could do some kind of snazzy pie chart, and you sure turned it around. So thank you very much for that.
You're welcome. And there is someone in the audience tonight that helped me in short fashion. So I'll make sure I thank her tomorrow during administrative day.
Thank you, Patty. So you're going to bring this back to us at the May 4th meeting then? We do not need an authorization to advertise. We'll do it at that time.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. And those two typos, I apologize, it will be corrected. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you, sir. We don't have any action items this evening. We'll move on to the general manager's report. Mr. Weekly.
All right, Mr. Dines will get that loaded. Thank you, sir. Just on some water information, although we issue KG alerts, anytime it may reach a higher level, I just want to make you aware of a water repair we did earlier this month at 6th Street on Fairview Beach. We did put out some notifications. Unfortunately, with some older pipe there, we ran into some complications. It caused a longer outage. We did stay in contact with, I'm not trying to say we prioritize businesses over residents, but sometimes it's easier to reach critical folks in that matter. So the restaurants out there, we're in contact. The restaurants were open for the evening. There was actually a longer delay than expected. I think we went live around 6 p.m. So Tim's, for example, was able to have dinner. We normally would not have long outages, but as indicated there, it's not the proper isolation valves that give us. I'm all about limiting outages, especially for planned work. And this was actually had started on a Thursday. We had to stop and come back on a Friday. We would not normally plan work on a Friday, a beautiful Friday at that, when folks are trying to dine in and come home from work and plan their weekend activities. So I just want to make you aware of what the circumstances were. We did flush. We didn't have any really extenuated dirty water calls, but we do have concern because there's older cast iron pipes. Anytime that system is taken down and brought back up, there are portions that you will stir up. And although Potomac Landing has newer pipe, that water has to travel through Fairview Beach to get to Potomac Landing. But we did flush the system. Recently, we had our water conservation and management plan approved by DEQ. We will get that up on the website, and the board of directors will get that copy. That plays into conservation and management strategies. There's education required outlined in that plan for both the general public and staff, making sure we're using water conservation tips. Wastewater, just a few housekeeping items. We're doing system repairs. There's just some noted issues. We're working through UV systems, replace some waste valves at Dahlgren plant. We're working on replacing some equipment over at Hop Yard that recently failed. We had a promotion to lead operator. Mr. Whitman, who has been the main operator at Fairview Beach, has ran Hop Yard Farms as well. We did make that promotion recently. Initially, when I came forth to the board to create that position, we had in mind 3 positions. Dahlgren will always be a standalone plant. It's more of a regional, if you will, although it only receives flow from Dahlgren. And then you have the 2 sister plants, Perkins and Oakland Park, has one lead operator overseeing daily activity, and this is a follow-up with the same mindset. Fairview Beach and Hop Yard like systems, having one lead operator, and it gives some daily oversight and communication with plant staff. Updated DEQ on our Priority 1 pump station projects, and during that call, Mr. Dacko, who's the enforcement manager out of the northern office, mentioned that they're still working on the superseding consent order. So we don't know what that would look like. If and when we ever receive that, I will definitely pass that along to Mr. Britton first, and then that discussion will come to the board level. Other information, RFPs for engineering services, they have been submitted. The selection committee will meet this week to discuss the review criteria. Thanks to Ms. Kupka, Ms. Bender, I think Travis was at the signing, Mr. Britton for pulling all that together. We did have the closing documents for the rate reset that came together, And as soon as that final packet is sent to me electronically, all members will receive that as well. Again, it's a savings of roughly $23,000 a year because it's lower interest on 2 particular loans. The American Rescue plan, which is funding, I know Ms. Kupka spoke about at past budget work session. We don't know what will be received yet. It's my understanding that the allocation will come to the county and they would, decide where that goes. However, I did receive recent information. I emailed the board. As being a member of the American Waterworks Association, we get several notifications of a variety of things. This funding is one of them. To inform us, the U.S. Treasury is still working on their guidelines for application. As soon as we have that, we'll start to work on that. I'll pass that along to members. I believe I included Matt because we'll have to make sure we're meeting our requirements there. Ms. Hahn as well. So we'll dive in that as soon as we have further information. Other information that's just current where we're at with CARES funding. As you know, we received $210,000 for utility relief funds. We've applied a little over $154,000. That gives you a balance a little over $55,000. And we got confirmation from the state. Customers now are eligible for a second round if they meet the criteria. They will, however, have to demonstrate financial hardship by a customer attestation form, which has to be submitted to us, reviewed, and approved before funding would be applied. And then below, lastly, your year-to-date number of connections. I usually brief you of where we're at. Again, we budget for 50 connections. Year-to-date, we're at 71 residential water and sewer, 9 residential water only, 2 commercial water only, which was BB&T and Northern Neck Auto Group are the 2 businesses recently who hooked onto our water. So we're well past our benchmark. Most of those do derive from hop yard development. Madam Chair, that concludes my report. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Weekly. Questions from directors? Mr. Parker?
No questions, ma'am.
Mr. Morris?
None.
Ms. Bender?
No questions.
Ms. Cleveland?
I'm just full of questions tonight. I do, thank you. Just a couple questions. So the hardship for the CARES Act, so is you and your staff responsible for approving the applications?
Yes, ma'am. So it's a 2-point. So we review and approve, but there are guidelines that they have to follow along with. And the oversight, the county is the fiscal agent. They had to sign off on that when the funds were received. So Ms. Hahn goes through and audits that, but we do administer that program through our offices. Yes, ma'am.
And just one more question too about the CARES Act. So do you have to pay that back or?
No, ma'am, it's not, you don't pay it back, but we can't go out unilaterally just because we have the $210,000, for example. We can't unilaterally just say, oh, these people are behind. The customer under penalty of law on that form sign off that they've had financial hardship, and I think there are several ways they can specify that. And this form, by the way, is online, the intake form for residents or commercial customers can apply for it. But they do have to attest to their hardship.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Cleveland. You actually asked one of the questions I was going to ask. In a way, the utility relief funds, Mr. Weekly, that $55,000, so that is still active on the county website?
So we can update our numbers. We didn't put a balance remaining on there. Mr. Dines thankfully uploaded the form so folks can go. As soon as they click that, that information comes directly to our office, so there is no waiting period. We know when they apply. But we definitely can update and put some kind of current, whether you want that on the newsflash portion or.
If we could do something in some fashion to try to get the word back out that there is some funding. I mean, you don't have to say how much, but just to let customers know there are some funds remaining, and that either anyone who didn't get captured the first time, now you said that they can submit for a second time. If we can come up with a way to let customers know that, and then has your staff attempted to re-engage any of the customers who maybe didn't apply for it the first time to see if they had interest?
So staff has actually engaged. So we do have, obviously we had the records of accounts, so we've reached out. And what Patty and Stacy have done, there's a pre-printed letter, and generally I believe we fill in the balance, and then we send the form so they're aware. Um, Unfortunately, sometimes, we're trying to get the message out. Folks may not read that and take that as, oh, I got to pay my bill. I mean, it's good they're staying current, but it defeats the purpose. So staff is actively, we look at those accounts. There is a 5% staff threshold that we have not applied for yet. So any staff time that's been spent, Stacy, Ms. Hahn's time on the county side, I don't charge for my time. That is applicable, but we're trying to use up those funds for customers as much as possible. So there will be another round of folks we'll reach out to. I think there were 19 that we just recently sent information to this past week. They received the information. Come on up. Please. Thank you, Patty.
Yes, staff has authorized 19 just here recently this past week of customers to receive the CARES Act. We've sent out 106 letters to customers that are past due that we believe could be eligible. And so we've sent them the application and the eligibility requirements.
Very good. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Patty. And so we won't send a mass mailing out. It will be targeted by the account information.
Very good. And then I just wanted to express my gratitude again to you and Travis and Matt and everyone who pulled together the rate change paperwork very quickly last week so that we were able to execute it. Thank you for that.
Thank you for accommodating your day. I appreciate that.
Sure thing. All right. Is that all for your general manager's report, sir?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Very good. We have no information items. And with that, I will entertain a motion.
I move that the King George County Service Authority Board of Directors convene in a closed meeting pursuant to State Code Section 2.2-3711, subsection A1, regarding discussion or consideration of the performance or resignation of a specific public officer or employee, namely the wastewater manager. I invite the general manager and the county attorney because they are deemed necessary and/or their presence will reasonably aid the board in the consideration of the topics to be discussed pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3712, Section F.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We are in closed session. Do I have a motion?
I move that the King George County Service Authority Board of Directors return to the public meeting and certify by vote that only public business matters lawfully exempt from open meeting requirements by Virginia law, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening in the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered during the closed meeting.
Second.
Mr. Parker?
Alan Parker, I say certify.
Mr. Morris?
James Morris, I certify.
Ms. Bender?
So certify.
Ms. Cleveland?
Carrie Cleveland, I certify.
Annie Kupka, so certify. We are in open session. Do I have another motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn to May 4th, 2021 at 5:30 PM in the boardroom.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We are adjourned.